moderator.
Of the logical questions that I ask is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who used to teach us how to brush our teeth, taught us how to go, excuse my language, to the bathroom, taught us how to be with our families, taught us how to travel, taught us how to eat. All of these the Prophet taught, and he could not leave behind a successor for his ummah? Logically. That's why the first point of call is, Ya Rasulullah, Saqifa's mess. If I didn't know about you appointing a successor, I would say Saqifa's mess is because of the Prophet, peace be upon him and his family. And further than that, I would say it's because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That every prophet of God had a wasi, had a successor. Yet your prophet, you leave him with a community that you already know before you've died, they're fighting each other in your own house when you ask for a pen and paper. Where Ibn Abbas says they started screaming at each other. And then you, on top of that, O Prophet of God, you could not announce to everybody that when I leave this world, I leave behind a successor. Is there no way that the heavens, Ya Allah, could you have not revealed this to the Prophet?
Wow, he threw it's one clip, but he threw he threw a lot in there. He threw a lot in there. So he came with the kind of like the standard thing that we're taught about the Aqli argument, which is, you know, the Prophet taught so many things. He taught you the basics of eating, traveling, marriage. He taught you every detail. But Ustad, he taught us all the detail. But why did he not teach us about the issue of Khilafah? Why did he not tell us, you know, how can we believe that he taught us all of that, but he never appointed a successor? Because in that thinking paradigm, if you don't leave a successor, basically you're leaving chaos. And that's what resulted in, you know, basically the Prophet not doing that resulted in kind of the mess of, you know, Khilafah, etc., etc. So Ustad, what do you say about that, Sayyid?
So what we would say about this is that our mawqif is that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the only thing he did not do was impose and thrust somebody on the ummah by force and make it binding and a part of religion to accept someone after him. But it's not like he left the ummah completely blank in this department. He did issue very strong and powerful recommendations highlighting the fada'il and the virtues and merits of Imam Ali alayhi salam, to the point that even the Imams of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, such as Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Ishaq bin Rahuya, the teacher of Imam al-Bukhari, these great jayyid ulama of Ahlul Sunnah had to say, لم يرد لأحد من صحابة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم من الفضائل بالأسانيد الصحاح الجياد ما ورد لعلي بن أبي طالب. They said there is no personality contemporary to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from his times for whom we have received as many fada'il, as many merits and virtues and excellences on the tongue of the Prophet with authentic and flawless chains as we have received from Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam. So the Holy Prophet definitely did introduce the ummah to the greatness and nobility of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He did explain to them how Imam Ali alayhi salam was so unique and how so, you know, blessed and gifted by God in so many domains. The Quran, even when it talks about the appointment of Talut, it talks about Inna Allah astafahu alaykum wa zadahu bastatan fil ilmi wal jism, that God favors those who have knowledge and who have physical strength. So there are a lot of criteria that the Quran and Sunnah provide us. The only thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger did not thrust this. They did not impose it. Rather, it was supposed to be something that they were supposed to arrive at through shura, which unfortunately after the Prophet did not happen, because there was a very hasty shura that was held. Due process was not followed. And because of that, for the first 6 months, even Imam Ali alayhi salam and the Banu Hashim were upset. But later on, the very fact that they reconciled and they made up with the caliphs, and then later on Imam Ali alayhi salam cooperated fully with them and gave them sound advice, all of that goes to show you that this was not a matter of iman, this was not a matter of a divine mandate that was violated, but rather simply something that was, yes, definitely, it was not ideal, but it was not kufr, it was not apostasy, it was not a negation of faith and iman and Islam, as Imam Zayd alayhi salam later argues with the people of Kufa. So that is a very important point to keep at the first level. The second thing is, if he's talking about the mess of Saqifa, and why did the Holy Prophet not...
That's another very common one, that based on you believing that there's no the Prophet hasn't designated no one after him, Allah hasn't chosen anyone after the Prophet, it has led to this mess of Saqifa and the Khilafah, and essentially they're trying to link it to probably the dynasties that came later that done a lot of dhulm on Al-Bayt.
Yeah, so basically our response to that is that if you're going to argue like this, this is an argument, a rational argument, not an argument from text. So if you're going to argue rationally like this, then it can also be argued, and we can also ask, how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leave the ummah without more prophets after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why did he not continue the line of prophets and messengers? I mean, it could be argued that the ummah was in need of more prophets and messengers after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Maybe not ulul azm, maybe not prophets and messengers who bring new books and new sharia, but like in the past, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would appoint a major ulul azm prophet, and then after him a series of lower ranking prophets, but prophets nonetheless. So actually, if you go to see, the whole mess of Saqifa could have been avoided if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had appointed Imam Ali alayhi salam to prophethood. Because there is no way anyone would dare to question or challenge or avoid accepting his authority if Allah had made him a prophet. You see, just as they were never able to challenge the Prophet's authority, in the sense of ousting him from power, no Muslim could dare to do that. Why? Because he was the Prophet. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead of placing a seal on prophethood, if Allah had not placed the seal and had continued the system of prophethood and clearly announced the next line of prophets, this whole mess would never have happened. No one would dare to gather at Saqifa to try and have an election to elect someone else when a prophet of God, a bona fide prophet of God, is present. So I mean, if you're going to start this blame game, then you can make all sorts of arguments. Okay.
Also, I think that the thing that I wanted to add on that, Sid, I fully good point that you made there. What the thing that I think also needs to be highlighted is because a lot of Shias, and obviously Sunnis don't know anyway, but a lot of Shias, they might not know, they don't know the history of Imamism. So because you don't know the history, what you're getting told now by, say, the Naqshbandi is the Saqifa, the Khilafah, potentially link it to Banu Umayyah later, link it to Karbala, and basically like say, look, this is the mess of Saqifa, which is kind of where the mindset goes. The thing that they're not understanding is that with this same kind of ugly argument, if you study the history of Imamism and how each sect of Shiism kind of branched out, there was complete mess after the dying of most Imams. From Imam Baqir, Imam Zain al-Abidin onwards, the Zaydiyah split, we have disputes. You have the Ismaili split. You have after each Imam, the Fatihah, like close companions and Imams, and there's confusion about who the Imam is. On top of that, we can mention the Ghaiba and how the confusion on that is. That confusion is still going till today. Amongst the scholarship of the Maraja, you have the Asuli Akhbari dispute, calling each other deviants. You have different strands of Shiism today, Imamism in terms of Wilayat al-Faqih, Wilayat al-Taqween, different strands of Ghulu. If I put all of this together, well, why didn't Allah just keep sending Imams? Because by Allah not doing that, Allah's now, so I can say by Allah not doing that, or Imam, the 11th Imam, or not doing that, and by Allah endorsing a Ghaiba, it's now caused this. So Allah should have just keep sending Imams, and that's, by the way, the Agha Khani claim. Now that's a whole different argument that they're a mess themselves. But do you see my point?
No, absolutely. That's a valid argument. I mean, if you're going to blame all these kinds of confusions on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that argument can be made against Ghaiba as well. Because for 12 centuries, it is precisely because of the Ghaiba of the Imam that the Shi'as became so hopelessly divided. That you have someone like Sayyid Ali Ayatullah al-Uzma, Sayyid Ali Bahrul Ulum, calling Wilaya Takbiniya kufr. Okay? In his Al-Burhan al-Qati' fi Sharh al-Mukhtasar al-Nafi'. And on the other hand, you have someone among the contemporary Maraja, someone like Sadiq al-Ruhani, who calls it Daruriyat al-Madhab. It's among the fundamental, non-negotiable aqidah of the madhab.
Well, one endorsing Tafweed, which is an old school belief, repackaged as Wilayat al-Queen, one calling it kufr. So where's the guidance? I thought we solved all this by the issue of God choosing. So we can link it back as well and say, based on that, if that never happened, this would have not happened. So Akalan, we can keep doing this all day.
Right. I mean, if you're going to argue rationally like this, then you cannot rationalize the ghaiba, because the ghaiba basically defeats the purpose of the imamah then. If the purpose of imamah was that there should be no confusion in the ummah.
Yeah, and any Shia who wants to know about this, I recommend the standard book on this, which is Crisis and Consolidation by Dr. Sayyid Mudarrisi. 100. Put that up on the screen, Sayyid. Put that on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, let it catch it. There you go. Yeah, Crisis. There you go. Anyone that wants to understand the history, because most people don't understand the history of Imamism, and you think that it's some smooth father gave it to son, no disputes. When you actually study the history, you'll realize after every Imam, there's been separate sects that have been made, and there's been complete disarray amongst the Imam's students. And I'm talking about the close students, according to the 12R narrative. You will realize that, hold on, like there is a big issue going on here, and there's a big problem going on here. And it doesn't stop to the fact that the Shia sects haven't ever, like, just because a lot of those Shia sects have died doesn't mean that you had a smooth transition. So definitely read that book, and you will see.
And do you know what the reason behind all that chaos and confusion? So the whole reason why the book is called Crisis and Consolidation. The crisis was, what was the cause of the crisis? It was taqiyya. Basically, when you have imams who do not call to themselves and they do not announce their imamah, and also they do not announce who's going to be the next one after them to the mainstream majority of their followers, naturally they fall into confusion. And not only do they fall into confusion, they end up accepting false imams. And there is plenty of evidence. When you permit me and give you the opportunity, I will showcase it on the screen, and you will see.
So I think from an Aqli perspective, Sayyid, I think that should be enough to kind of deal with those points. Moderate.